Imagine this. You are standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind howling around you, the ground beneath your feet crumbling just slightly with each breath. A voice in your head whispers, "Jump," not because you want to die, but because for a fleeting moment, the sheer terror of it thrills you. Your heart pounds, your skin prickles with electricity, and in that split second, you feel more alive than you have in years. Now imagine something far more unsettling. What if this isn't an anomaly? What if, buried beneath your rational mind, beneath your pursuit of happiness and comfort, there is a part of you that craves the fall? Not just the adrenaline of danger, but the slow, grinding ache of struggle, the weight of sorrow, the bitter taste of failure. Here's the great contradiction. Human beings spend their lives running from pain, yet we are irresistibly drawn to it. We romanticize heartbreak in music. We glorify hardship in stories of heroes. We chase goals that demand suffering. And we stay in situations that drain us, long after logic says we should leave. Why? Why do we replay our worst memories like a film we can't turn off? Why do we sabotage our own peace with unnecessary battles? Why do we feel a strange magnetic pull toward the very things we claim to fear? This is not a flaw. This is not madness. This is something far more profound, something coded into the architecture of your mind, the pulse of your existence. You do not crave suffering because you are broken. You crave it because on some primal level, you know it serves you. But how? How could pain, something we're conditioned to avoid at all costs, hold such power over us? How could the very thing we flee from also be the thing we secretly seek? The answer lies in a truth so unsettling that it will force you to question the foundation of your desires. It will unravel the illusion of happiness as you know it, and reveal why, in the shadows of your psyche, you have always been in a silent, desperate dance with suffering. And the most terrifying question of all is, what if you need it? You tell yourself you want peace, yet you choose chaos. You claim to seek happiness, yet you linger in situations that guarantee its opposite. You build routines designed for comfort, only to feel restless, unsatisfied, itching for something to disrupt them. This is not an accident. This is the shadow work of the human psyche. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the repressed, denied parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge, yet which dictate our actions in ways we don't understand. Nietzsche saw it as the core of human greatness. To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. And Viktor Frankl, who endured the Holocaust, came to a chilling realization. Man does not seek pleasure, but meaning, and meaning is often born in agony. So why do we crave suffering? Because suffering is the only force sharp enough to carve reality into something we can recognize as real. Pleasure is fleeting, comfort is forgettable. But pain etches itself into your bones. It forces you to pay attention. It makes life matter. Think of the last time you truly grew. Was it in moments of ease, or was it when you were broken open? When the ground fell out from under you? When you had no choice but to confront what you'd spent your whole life avoiding? Modern society has sold you a lie, that suffering is a glitch, an error in the system of existence. But philosophy, psychology, and neuroscience all whisper the same dark truth. You are wired for struggle. Dopamine, the chemical of desire, is not triggered by reward, but by the pursuit of reward, the tension of uncertainty, the ache of not yet having. Without friction, without resistance, your mind starves. This is why you sabotage your own happiness, not because you're broken, but because your subconscious knows something your conscious mind refuses to accept. A life without suffering is a life without depth. But here's where it gets dangerous. Because if suffering is inevitable, if on some level you need it, then the real question isn't, how do I escape pain? But, what kind of pain am I willing to endure? And most people never choose. They let life choose for them. You wake up each morning with the same quiet dread, not of hardship, but of emptiness. You scroll through endless feeds, numb to the dopamine hits, chasing a satisfaction that never comes. You fill your life with noise, with distraction, with cheap substitutes for struggle, because the modern world has sold you a counterfeit existence, a life without friction. But here's the tragedy. In your desperation to avoid pain, you've created a far worse kind of suffering, the kind that doesn't burn clean, but rots, the kind that doesn't forge you, but hollows you out. Studies on anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure, reveal a chilling pattern. When the brain is deprived of meaningful challenge, it stops responding to reward. Your capacity for joy withers when it isn't tested. This is why the most depressed demographics aren't those in war zones or famine, but those in cushioned, air-conditioned despair. The ones who have everything they thought they wanted, yet feel nothing at all. Your brain is a meaning-making machine. It doesn't want happiness. It wants contrast. Light needs darkness. Triumph needs resistance. Love needs the risk of loss. Strip life of its edges, and you don't get paradise. You get the muted horror of nothing mattering. This is the silent epidemic of our age. Voluntary helplessness, because suffering isn't your enemy. Stagnation is. The Roman philosopher Seneca warned of this 2,000 years ago. Difficulty comes not from the mountains we climb, but from the pebble in our shoe. What he meant was this. It's not the grand struggles that destroy people. It's the 1,000 tiny surrenders, the avoidance of small pains that accumulate into existential paralysis. You were never meant to be safe. You were meant to be alive. And that requires something most refuse to face: the courage to choose your suffering. The moment you realize this, truly realize it, everything changes. A switch flips in your mind. The question is no longer, how do I avoid suffering? But, what suffering will I allow to transform me? Because you finally understand. The pain is not optional. Only your relationship to it is. This is where the rebellion begins. Nietzsche's greatest insight was amor fati, the love of fate. Not mere acceptance, but a full-throated embrace of every agony, every setback, every crushing blow. Not because you enjoy the hurt, but because you recognize it as the price of existing at full intensity. The Stoics called it the art of voluntary discomfort, deliberately seeking out hardship to immunize yourself against fear. The samurai practiced mushin, a state of mind where suffering neither repels nor defines you, but moves through you like wind through a hollow reed. Here's how you start. Choose your struggle. Every meaningful life requires sacrifice, but most people let circumstance choose theirs. The artist embraces the suffering of rejection rather than the suffering of regret. The athlete chooses the pain of discipline over the pain of weakness. The lover risks heartbreak because the alternative, never loving deeply, is a slower death. Reframe your pain. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz by realizing that while his captors controlled his body, they couldn't control his mind's response. Between stimulus and response, there is a gap, and in that gap lies your power. Suffering without meaning is torture. Suffering with meaning is initiation. Seek worthy adversity. Modernity offers two traps: endless comfort or meaningless misery. The way out: deliberate challenge. Train for something that scares you. Have the conversation you've been avoiding. Create something that could fail spectacularly. Your brain interprets voluntary hardship differently than imposed suffering. One builds resilience, the other breeds victimhood. Let it burn. Clean Jungian therapy uses active imagination to dialogue with pain. Sit with your suffering and ask, what are you here to teach me? Like alchemists turning lead to gold, the rebels of history learn to transmute agony into wisdom. This isn't about masochism. It's about sovereignty. When you stop running from suffering, you disarm it. When you lean into the sharp edges of existence, you discover a secret. You are far stronger than your comforts allowed you to believe. The fire that terrifies you is the same fire that forges you. Here is the secret your soul has been whispering to you in every moment of anguish. You do not crave suffering. You crave becoming. The ancient alchemists didn't just turn lead into gold. They encoded the entire human journey in their symbols. The Negrito stage, darkness, dissolution, the ego in ruins. The albedo, washing away illusions in saltwater tears. Only then could the rubedo emerge, the unshakable self, forged in the furnace of suffering. This is why you're drawn to storms, because clarity comes when the fog burns off in the heat of crisis. Because truth sounds different when shouted over the howl of gale-force winds. Because you've always known, somewhere beyond thought, that comfort is the quicksand, while suffering is the ground that holds your weight. The Buddhists were right about dukkha, suffering, but wrong about escape. The existentialists were right about absurdity, but missed the ecstasy hidden within it. The full truth is this: your most agonizing moments have been the labor pains of your becoming. That job loss, the relationship that gutted you, the nights you prayed for an end, those weren't interruptions to your life. They were the curriculum. Now the ultimate question remains: will you keep resisting the fire, or will you finally let it burn away everything that isn't you? The choice has always been yours.